What was kind of that first moment where you were like, fuck that, I'm just going all in on me? Like, what was the trigger point?
So I've got a couple. Let me tell you a couple good ones. I have one story that I saved for this because I've told the story about the girl breaking my heart when I was 14 or 15 or whatever. What I don't tell is what happened when I was like 23. I've been with my wife for a long time, and there was a breakup where we were not together for 6 months. And so this girl from my high school, in college, one of the first times I went all in was when I decided that I wanted to play basketball again. So I walked onto that team and it became my life, and I transformed physically. Like, I got jacked. I was a practice player, but like my whole life changed. That was like my first glow up, right? And I get back after college that last year, and I'm working out at my local gym, and that girl's there, and we had like a decent relationship. And I remember she comes up to me and my friend, and she like puts her hand on my shoulder and she says, "Oh my God, Rob, you've gained like 50 pounds of muscle," like something like that. And long story short, I slayed that demon, for lack of a better term, while I was on a break with my wife. And it just that was one of the moments, though, where I realized everything comes full circle when you're who you're supposed to be. Like, I focused on me. It's so cliche, but I didn't spend time, obsessing over girls or chasing these things. Like, I was focused on my individual glow up, and it just showed how easy all of the other things tend to fall into place. And so that was one of the moments. And then I'd say more recently too, there hasn't been like an aha, but it's been the more that I double down on who I'm supposed to be, the better life keeps getting. And that's operating from a place of like very natural abundance. That's investing in others around me. That's giving back. That's not being afraid to buy the pants I want or whatever. And things just keep getting better. Like in general, business keeps going better. Like, I've made more money, at least on paper, with some of the brand growth and stuff in the last 2 years than I did my entire career prior. And it's not like I wasn't successful before that, but that was me going in on me, on like, truly. And the results speak for itself. The results speak for themselves.
I think it's actually, the self-improvement is like an addictive angle, because you start doing it and you start seeing the results and what happens, and it just, each win spurs you on to the next win. And I wanted to share a quote that you put on your Twitter. You said Nietzsche was right on the money when he said that the modern man has to literally relearn how to believe in himself. You need to teach yourself to be confident. You do this by taking bets and surpassing your own expectations. Eventually, you build a big enough portfolio of wins to rest your laurels on. Start stacking confidence points now.
Yeah. I think modern society in general, again, it forces conformity. That's why there's like this obsessive idea of like the Matrix or whatever, which I totally reject, because I never think it's never been easier to create your own life and design your own life and make money however you want and all that stuff. We can talk about that more later. But in today's world, they don't like accept someone who stands up and wants to claim W's. That's pushed away. And again, there's so many reasons, like societally, why you shouldn't shoot the shot, why you shouldn't start the business, right? But in reality, this is the greatest place in the world, greatest time in history to be building anything. And it's like, what's the worst case if you fail? Like, I mean, even we have bankruptcy law. Like, there's literally no downside to starting to stack wins. And we've gotten so far out of that game. It's not even funny. And so again, I hope to lean into messages like that, because I'm only one person. But if some of these messages become more mainstream, have you heard the idea of life maxing, which I've been pushing? I mean, life maxing is just this idea that you need to take your scorecard and you have your different main traits, and then you max all of those out. So it can be business. There's often something physical, like, for me, it's martial arts. I love to box. Like, I do that several times a week. Experiences, and basically you reject this idea of balance in exchange for an obsessive foot on the gas everything in life. Like, even when you're finding peace, it's in like recovery through, a trip or whatever, but you're constantly investing in all the components of life that are going to max out your life. And that inherently fuels each thing. Like, every new time I go do an experience like this, flying to New York to do this podcast, I told you, like, I wanted to come to New York. I wanted to spend some time here. That was an investment in an experience. It was an investment in a relationship, but that's going to come back. And I'm not worried about work-life balance or anything. I'm trying to set up a life where I'm constantly working. And the more that people can align that way in a young age, the better off they're going to do. The TikTok shop kids are a phenomenal example of this, and we can talk about that later.
You know what I've realized? The default kind of mood or mindset, I feel like, when I observe a lot of people, and we all fall into this in different stages of our life, is kind of indifference.
Yeah.
It's like almost like apathy. It's like just...
but in the wrong way. We numb ourselves to the fact we're dying. Like, you go walk the streets of Wall Street right now, and even the intern doing the private banking thing, like, he is so focused on that day and getting back to working his 14-hour day and getting on the couch and just working to be 30 to get that promotion, to be the millionaire, to be the, like, it's soul numbing versus crafting out a life where you're indifferent to people's opinion of you, right? We're indifferent to the reality that we're going to die, and you need to be indifferent to the reality that other people's opinions don't matter.
And I feel like the reason I even mention that is that the energy that you bring, it's like you're going after it. And I can tell even the way that you speak, there's like, it's personal for you. And I find that interesting. Whenever someone sits in that chair and they're speaking about something, and I can tell it's personal. To me, what that signals is that there's some sort of experience. There's something that's happened in their life that they're like, I'm not doing this at 50%. I'm gonna do this like my life depends on it, because it does, it's personal. And so I'm kind of curious for that. Like, why is it so personal for you, this kind of relentless drive to self-improve, to get better? Why is that such a strong thing?
I think the biggest question is, what do you want in life? And then when you realize that anything in life requires a certain level of effort and focus, if you want it in a meaningful amount of time, then there's truly no other way to behave. I mean, if you want to build a business, like, go through Silicon Valley and you're not going to see any guys that half-assed it, that did it part-time. If you want to build a monster podcast, you fucking, I know you live and breathe this thing. I know, I've seen the growth in a short amount of time. You're a perfect example, but that's just what it takes. And it's not meant to be like the dry Hormozy, like, you just need to work 1 million hours. It's like, no, you need to find your passion and your flow. And in that, it doesn't even feel like you're working. But if you're not taking that approach, then I don't think there's any point in doing it. Like, I think people spin their wheels. I know people spin their wheels and waste their time quarter-assing something when they're 80 years old, that will have mattered zero. Whereas building a huge show or building a brand that's going to live beyond me, those are impactful things. And I would rather put all my time and effort into those. And so I guess I do talk about them very obsessively, but it starts to become second nature when it becomes your life.
You know what, you mentioned the point about quarter-assing, like just not putting your all into it. And I wanted to read this because you had a moment of that. And you said, life was great during college, but then I graduated and I had no idea what to do next. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but at that time I was lost. I went through a dark period of my life. I was smoking weed daily, constantly having depressive thoughts. There was no clear path for me to make it. Can you just talk about that period?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated a little bit early. I had like running start credits, and I finished college, and I was like, I'm going to take this time off. And that was one of the first times I just end up on the couch every day playing Call of Duty, smoking. And it's like the best thing in the world for a week. And then 2 weeks, you're like, what am I doing with my life? And by the end of a month, you're like, what's the point of this existence? Like, period. I just spent this time in college. My basketball years are done. What am I going to do next? And I think this is a point where maybe a lot of people tune it out and just like start to numb themselves, start to become indifferent. They train themselves. I think a lot of people have like a mild depression, and rather than address it and be in tune with it and ask themselves why, it becomes part of their life. It becomes their normal. And so that's what eventually prompted me to just like, hey, I have to figure this out. That's when I went and shadowed my uncle. Like, I spent some more time with my dad, and I was like, I just have to find out how to make it in some capacity. This is before early social media too, so I don't have like Ty Lopez telling me I need to make money online or Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week or anything. This is just a kid becoming in tune with his emotions and becoming in tune with the reality that this isn't a forever thing. This life isn't a forever thing, and you have to start figuring it out, and you have to carve something out. So
I remember Chris Williamson says this thing. He says, most people live lives of quiet desperation.
yeah, it's exactly that, right? That depression kind of starts, and few people are brave enough to address it. They say, you know what, if I get that corporate job, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to. and then they start that corporate job, and then it's like, it becomes worse, but it's like, you know, if I get that promotion or get a vacation to kind of break you out of it briefly, but you zoom out 30, 40 years, and I think millennials as a whole like have really, really fucked up. Like the dream of the millennials has been a little social media and a tech job and a, you know, Starbucks to go. And the end result is like less kids, less fulfillment, all of this stuff. But I think we're seeing it right size with the younger generation that's becoming more self-aware, if you will. But yeah, Chris hit that one on the head.
No, 100%, 100%. Do you remember the day it kind of changed? Like, if the default is that most people live lives of quiet desperation and you're going through these days where day after day, it's like smoking weed, playing video games.
Yeah.
You remember the day where you're like, nah, this is different.
So that moment was another gradual shift. And eventually I fell on Amazon. And when I found Amazon, I started to make some money. And that was like a bit of a cure, right? Like life started to feel a little bit better. I'd still live my normal life. Like I'd go to the gym, I'd eat Chipotle, but I was still kind of on autopilot. Everything really changed when I got a phone call from my mom. I was sitting in my little desk, like just starting my day. And she's like, hey, I need you to know that your dad took your grandma in for an operation this morning and she didn't wake up. And I'm like, what do you mean she didn't wake up? Like my Nana is what we call her. She was the center of our family, 70, super young, had lived a crazy life. You know, I told you she had my dad when she was 14, and all of a sudden she's not waking up. And I'm like, what does that mean? And basically she went in, she had an operation on her leg, freak deal, and her heart stopped. And they did revive her. And so this, I think, is what made it worse and more surreal. They revived her, but she was totally brain dead. And so, you know, immediately we go to the emergency room. My whole family spent the entire week there. And she's a vegetable, and we're just praying for that 0.01% miracle all week. And I see my dad cry for the first time in his life. I see, you know, my grandpa beg her to wake up, and it never happened. And on Easter of all days, this was like the moment. On Easter, after she'd been out for a week, we all go in that room and there's the decision made to pull the plug, and everyone circles around her and we hold hands. My dad couldn't be in there. My grandpa couldn't be in there. It was like me, my mom, and mostly women, and play this song she loved, Rocket Man by Elton John. And they pulled the plug and, you know, she takes a gasp and you just see the flatline. And that was after like a week of hell. And I remember going to the window and kind of looking out. It's in Seattle, and feeling like almost spirits. It was like this surreal like energy where I don't know if it's her leaving the room or what, but you're like, what the fuck? And pretty much like the day after that, we're all sitting at dinner, and it's like life goes on. And you have to find this kind of new normal. But most importantly, you remember that like, yo, that's going to happen to my dad. That's going to happen to me. And that kickstarted this fever. Like that was when I like, hold on, I have this Amazon thing. I'm making 20 grand a month. I'm seeing, you know, guys build these bigger brands. Why not me? Why not do something she'd be proud of? Why not do something I'd be proud of? And that was pretty much the moment where I abandoned my old life, like dramatically. Like I stopped going to the gym. I realized this internet thing was here. I can create something that changes my life, at least changing my life forever. And I poured in that shit like fucking crazy. But it was that prompt with death or experience with death that tends to kind of be a recurring theme in my life, that it focuses you. You get one shot and you're only gonna live for you. And so that was that was the first moment where like a light bulb really came on.
Yeah.